The proposition. The delicate notes of Vivaldi's Winter filled the small practice room as Olivia James closed her eyes, letting her violin speak the emotions her words never could. At 32, she was still playing backup in the city orchestra, instead of taking center stage as she'd once dreamed. Her instructor at Juilliard had called her brilliantly emotive but commercially unmarketable. A polite way of saying she lacked the connections and compromising spirit needed to succeed in classical music's elite circles. The final note hung in the air as Olivia opened her eyes to an empty room. Empty, except for the man standing in the doorway. "Impressive," he said, his voice carrying the crisp authority of someone accustomed to being heard. "You play like you're having a conversation with the composer himself." Olivia lowered her violin. "This is a private rehearsal room, sir." "Dominic Westfield," he said, as if the name alone explained his presence. When she showed no recognition, a flicker of surprise crossed his face. "I own the building." Now she placed him, the reclusive founder of Westfield Technologies, whose face rarely appeared in the tech magazines that celebrated his innovations. In person, he seemed younger than his reported 38 years, though the intensity of his gaze suggested someone who had seen more of the world than most. "Well, Mr. Westfield, even building owners should knock," Olivia replied, carefully placing her violin in its case. "What can I help you with?" "I have a business proposition." "For you, Miss James?" Olivia laughed. "I'm a violinist, not a businesswoman." "You're also the sister of Thomas James, who works in my legal department," Dominic countered. "He speaks highly of your adaptability." Her brother. Of course. Thomas had been trying to help her career for years, though she'd resisted his corporate connections, determined to succeed on musical merit alone. A determination that had left her with mounting debts and a notice of eviction taped to her apartment door that morning. "I'm listening," she said cautiously. Dominic stepped fully into the room, closing the door behind him. "I need someone to pretend to be in a relationship with me for the next 4 months." Olivia blinked. "Excuse me? My company is finalizing a merger with Nakamura Technologies. Their CEO is traditional to the point of superstition. He believes in harmonious personal lives reflecting harmonious business partnerships." "And your personal life isn't harmonious enough?" Olivia asked. "My personal life is private," Dominic replied flatly. "I need someone convincing, intelligent, and discreet to play the role of my partner until the merger is complete." Olivia studied him. "Why me?" "Your brother mentioned you studied theater before music. You understand performance. And you have no connections to my industry that might create conflicts of interest." "And what would I get out of this arrangement?" Dominic named a figure that made Olivia's fingers tighten around her violin case. It would cover her debts, her rent for a year, and still leave enough to fund the youth music program she'd been trying to launch. "There would be rules, of course," he continued. "Complete discretion. No physical relationship, no emotional entanglements. When the contract ends, we part ways as strangers." Olivia thought of her eviction notice, of the rejection email from the grant committee she'd applied to for the 5th time, of the young students she'd had to turn away because she couldn't afford to teach them for free anymore. "I have conditions." "Of my own," she said finally. "I maintain my performance schedule. I won't lie to my brother about the nature of our arrangement, and I want everything in writing." Dominic extended his hand. "Do we have an agreement, Ms. James?" Olivia hesitated only briefly before shaking it. "We have an agreement, Mr. Westfield." Neither of them realized they had just composed the first notes of a symphony neither had planned to play. The performance, the Black Tie Charity Gala at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, provided the perfect debut for their fabricated romance. Olivia stood before the mirror in her apartment, hardly recognizing herself in the midnight blue gown Dominic had sent over. Elegant, expensive, but somehow perfectly suited to her taste. The note accompanying it had been characteristically brief. Wear this. Car arrives at 7. 3 weeks into their arrangement, and Dominic remained an enigma, efficient in his instructions, generous in his provisions, and utterly closed off otherwise. Their rehearsals, as he called them, had been meticulous. She knew his favorite books, historical biographies, his coffee preference, black, no sugar, and the story of how he started his company in a garage with 2 college friends, though he'd later bought them out. He, in turn, had memorized details about her musical career, her childhood in Connecticut, and her allergy to shellfish. "Ready for tonight?" Thomas asked from her doorway. Her brother remained the only person aware of the true nature of her relationship with Dominic. "As ready as one can be to lie convincingly to hundreds of people," Olivia replied, securing a simple pearl earring. Thomas frowned. "You know, most people would be thrilled to date a billionaire, even pretend." "I'm not dating him. I'm performing for him," she corrected. "And he's not paying for my company. He's paying for my ability to make people believe something that isn't true." The sleek black car arrived precisely at 7. Dominic sat inside, his attention fixed on his phone until she entered. When he looked up, something flickered across his expression, so brief she might have imagined it. "You look appropriate," he said, returning to his device. "Your compliments sweep me off my feet," Olivia replied dryly. That earned her the ghost of a smile. "Save the performance for our audience." At the gala, Dominic transformed. His hand rested lightly at the small of her back as he guided her through the crowd. He introduced her to business associates, board members, and potential investors with a warmth entirely absent in private. Most remarkably, he listened, actually listened, when she spoke, his eyes never straying to scan the room for more important connections. "You're quite good at this," she murmured during a momentary reprieve from socializing. "Contrary to popular belief, I do know how to interact with humans," he replied. "Could have fooled me," she said, taking a sip of champagne. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of an elegant Japanese man who Dominic greeted with unusual deference. "Mr. Nakamura, I'd like you to meet Olivia James," Dominic said, his hand finding hers with practiced ease. "The musician," Mr. Nakamura said with a slight bow. "Dominic mentioned your talent. I did not realize he had found someone who matches him in both intellect and artistic sensibility." Olivia felt Dominic tense beside her. This wasn't part of their rehearsed exchanges. "We balance each other," she improvised. "Dominic grounds me when I get lost in the emotional aspects of music. I remind him there's more to life than quarterly reports." Mr. Nakamura's eyes crinkled with approval. "The best partnerships are complementary, not identical. This is true in business and in life." Later, as they danced, something they hadn't practiced but somehow managed with natural coordination, Dominic leaned closer than necessary. "You handled Nakamura perfectly," he said, his breath warm against her ear. "He's already messaged his board about accelerating our timeline." "Just doing my job," Olivia replied, suddenly aware of how perfectly they moved together, how natural his hand felt against her waist. The evening concluded with Dominic escorting her to his penthouse, a necessary performance for the benefit of watching eyes. Inside, the warmth evaporated. He loosened his tie, instantly absorbed in messages on his phone. "The guest room is prepared for you," he said without looking up. "We'll need to be seen leaving together tomorrow morning." Olivia nodded, though he wasn't watching. As she walked toward the guest suite, she caught a glimpse of Dominic's reflection in a darkened window. For a moment, when he thought no one was looking, his confident posture slumped, and something like loneliness crossed his features. It was the first genuine expression she'd seen from him, and it lingered in her mind long after she closed her bedroom door, drawing a definitive line between their public charade and private reality. The complications. 2 months into their arrangement, the lines began to blur. What had started as carefully choreographed appearances evolved into something less defined. Olivia found herself picking up Dominic's favorite tea without being asked. He began attending her orchestra performances, sitting in the back row where he thought she wouldn't notice. They still maintained separate lives behind closed doors, but the walls between performance and reality had developed hairline fractures. "You're different lately," Thomas commented over lunch. "Less stressed about money, obviously, but it's more than that." Olivia stirred her coffee absently. "The agreement is working out well. Dominic is not what I expected." "Meaning?" "He's complex," she admitted. "Last week I found him teaching his housekeeper's son to code. The week before, he donated anonymously to save the community arts center where I volunteer. He pretends to be cold, but there's more underneath." Thomas studied her carefully. "Liv, please tell me you're not breaking rule number 3. No emotional entanglements," she recited. "I'm not. I'm just observing." The truth was more complicated. She'd begun to catalog the contradictions that made up Dominic Westfield, the man who claimed to despise classical music but kept a vintage record player in his study with vinyl recordings of Yo-Yo Ma, the technological visionary who read paper books because he claimed screens couldn't capture the soul of words, the supposed loner who remembered the birthdays of every employee's children. That evening, she arrived at his penthouse for what had become their weekly strategy dinner to find him uncharacteristically disheveled, pacing his living room with agitated steps. "The Nakamura deal is in trouble," he said without preamble. "Their board is concerned about my commitment to the partnership. Apparently, being in a relationship isn't enough. They want to see stability." Olivia set down her purse. "What does that mean exactly? They've invited us to spend a week at Nakamura's private estate in Kyoto. His entire family will be there. His wife, his children, his parents." Dominic ran a hand through his already messy hair. "We can't possibly maintain the facade for a week of intimate family interaction." "We've managed so far," Olivia pointed out. "This is different. These people value family above all else. They'll see through us immediately." Olivia approached him slowly. "Then we'll need to be more convincing." "How?" he demanded. "We need to know each other. Really know each other. Beyond the practice details." She sat on the couch, gesturing for him to join her. "Why did you really start your company?" Dominic remained standing. "You know the story." "I know the press release version. Tell me the truth." Their eyes locked in silent challenge before he finally sank onto the couch, keeping careful distance between them. "My father was a factory worker who lost his job to automation," he said quietly. "He never recovered. I wanted to create technology that empowered people rather than replaced them." The revelation hung in the air between them. "Your turn," he said. "Why did you choose the violin?" "Because it was the only thing that made my mother smile after my father left." She hadn't planned to share that truth, but it emerged anyway. Something shifted that night. For hours, they exchanged unvarnished truths instead of rehearsed facts. She learned about his childhood in foster care after his parents died. He discovered her dreams of creating music therapy programs for trauma survivors. When midnight came and went, neither noticed the time. In Japan the following week, they moved through the Nakamura estate with newfound synchronicity. They finished each other's sentences without planning. They had genuine inside jokes. When Dominic's hand found hers beneath the dinner table, it no longer felt like performance. On their 5th night, during a traditional tea ceremony, Mrs. Nakamura leaned toward Olivia while the men discussed business. "When did you know he was the one?" she asked with gentle curiosity. Olivia glanced at Dominic across the room, catching his eye briefly. "I didn't," she said truthfully. "It happened so gradually I couldn't pinpoint the moment. One day I just realized the music in my head changed when he was near." Mrs. Nakamura nodded with satisfaction. "That is real love. Not fireworks, but harmony." Later that night, alone in their shared suite, Olivia stood on the balcony overlooking The garden, wrestling with an uncomfortable realization, she'd broken the third rule. Somewhere between rehearsed smiles and unguarded conversations, she'd developed genuine feelings for a man who had explicitly forbidden them. Behind her, the balcony door slid open. Dominic joined her, keeping a careful distance. "Nakamura is satisfied," he said. "The merger agreement will be signed tomorrow." "Then our job is almost done," Olivia replied, surprised by the hollowness in her chest at the thought. "Yes." He hesitated. "You've exceeded expectations." "High praise from Dominic Westfield," she said with a forced smile. The moonlight cast shadows across his face as he turned toward her. "Olivia, Don't," she interrupted, suddenly afraid of what he might say, or worse, what he might not say. "Remember the rules." He nodded stiffly, retreating behind the mask of professionalism she'd grown to recognize. "Of course. Good night, Olivia." As he left, she remained facing the garden, refusing to acknowledge the truth that had become increasingly clear. In pretending to fall in love, she had forgotten to pretend. The revelation. The contract had 31 days remaining when everything unraveled. The Nakamura merger was proceeding smoothly, their public appearances had become routine, and Olivia had nearly convinced herself she could complete the arrangement, with her heart intact. Then came the Symphony Benefit Gala. Olivia performed a solo piece, Tchaikovsky's Violin Concerto, that earned her a standing ovation. As she took her final bow, she spotted Dominic in the front row, applauding with uncharacteristic enthusiasm. Their eyes met across the distance, and the music inside her swelled to a crescendo she could no longer ignore. At the reception afterward, she searched for him through the crowd, only to find him deep in conversation with Regina Powell, the renowned symphony director who had once rejected Olivia for a coveted position. "Dominic," she said, approaching them with practiced poise. "Ms. Powell." Regina's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Olivia, lovely performance tonight. I was just telling Mr. Westfield about our upcoming international tour. We're seeking a principal violinist." "How fortunate," Olivia replied, feeling Dominic's tension beside her. "Indeed," Regina continued, "Mr. Westfield has generously offered to become our season sponsor, contingent on certain artistic decisions, of course." Understanding dawned with sickening clarity. Dominic wasn't just applauding her performance, he was purchasing her dream position. "If you'll excuse me," Olivia managed before turning away, maintaining composure until she reached the empty corridor outside. Dominic found her minutes later. "You left abruptly." "Did you think I wouldn't figure it out?" she demanded. "You're buying me a position in the symphony." "I'm creating an opportunity." "No," she cut him off. "You're doing exactly what I've fought against my entire career. Using connections instead of merit." Dominic's expression hardened. "You deserve that position. Powell rejected you 3 years ago because you lacked pedigree, not talent. That's not your decision to make. I have the means to fix an injustice. I never asked you to fix anything." Olivia's voice echoed in the empty hallway. "Do you have any idea what it's like to never know if you've earned something or if it was handed to you? To wonder if every opportunity came because of your connection to Dominic Westfield rather than your own abilities?" His jaw tightened. "Is that what you think of me? That I'm using my influence to control you?" "I don't know what to think anymore," she admitted, suddenly exhausted. "This whole relationship is built on deception. Where does the lie end and the truth begin?" The question hung between them, unanswerable. "The contract has a month left," Dominic finally said, his voice controlled. "We should maintain appearances until then." "And if I don't want to continue?" Something flashed in his eyes. Hurt, perhaps, or anger. "The agreement includes a non-completion penalty clause." "Of course it does," Olivia laughed bitterly. "Everything's transactional with you." "That was the arrangement you agreed to," he reminded her coldly. "My mistake was forgetting it was just business." She removed the delicate bracelet he'd given her for public appearances, placing it in his palm. "I'll fulfill the contract, Mr. Westfield, but I think we both need to remember what's real and what's performance." The following weeks passed in strained politeness. They appeared together at required events, smiled for appropriate photographs, and maintained the illusion for watching eyes. But behind closed doors, they existed in separate orbits, the warmth between them replaced by professional courtesy. 3 days before the contract's conclusion, Thomas called Olivia in a panic. "Have you seen the news?" he asked without greeting. She hadn't. The headline on her browser made her stomach drop. "Westfield Technologies founder steps down amid merger completion." The article detailed how Dominic had unexpectedly resigned his position as CEO, transferring leadership to his longtime COO while retaining only a minority stake in the company he'd built. "This makes no sense," Thomas continued. "The Nakamura deal is his legacy. Why would he walk away now?" Olivia had no answer, but an inexplicable urgency drove her to Dominic's penthouse. His security team admitted her access had never been revoked, but the apartment stood eerily empty. Personal items were missing, bookshelves half cleared. On the kitchen counter lay a manila envelope with her name. Inside, she found a document, releasing her from the remaining days of their contract, a check for the full amount promised, and a brief note. "You were right. Some things shouldn't be transactional." Attached was a letter from Regina Powell, offering Olivia the touring position, with a postscript clarifying that Westfield Technologies had withdrawn its conditional sponsorship, and the offer was based solely on her recent performances. As Olivia stood in the emptying apartment, she realized Dominic had given her what she truly wanted, the chance to succeed on her own merits. What he hadn't given her was the one thing she hadn't known she needed until it was gone, himself. The resolution 4 months passed. Olivia's position with the symphony took her across Europe, her performances earning critical acclaim that had nothing to do with wealth or influence. The youth music program she'd established with her contract, earnings was thriving in her absence, managed by capable instructors who shared her vision, yet success tasted hollow. The music that had once flowed effortlessly through her now required concentrated effort. Technically perfect, but emotionally restrained, critics called her recent performances. Brilliant, but guarded. In Paris, after a standing room-only concert, she returned to her hotel to find Thomas waiting in the lobby. "Surprise," he said, embracing her. "I was in London for a deposition and thought I'd hop over." Over late dinner, he studied her carefully. "You're different." "Successful, finally," she replied with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "That's not what I mean." He hesitated. "Have you heard from him?" Olivia focused on her untouched wine. "No, but I've read about him." The business press had tracked Dominic's unexpected journey. After leaving his company, he'd established a foundation focused on technological education for underprivileged communities. He'd vanished from social circuits, emerging occasionally for keynote speeches about ethical innovation. The most recent article mentioned a teaching position at MIT. "He asked about you," Thomas admitted. "Last month, when the foundation partnered with our legal department." Olivia's heart quickened traitorously. "What did he say?" "He asked if you were happy." Thomas reached for his phone, pulling up a video. He also gave a commencement address. "I thought you should see." On the small screen, Dominic stood before graduates, more relaxed than she remembered him, though his eyes carried the same intensity. "Success isn't measured by what you accumulate," he told the students, "but by what you discover about yourself in the process. I spent years building a company based on what I thought mattered, only to realize I'd constructed an elaborate performance of a life rather than living one." His words pierced her with painful recognition. "Sometimes," he continued, "we create elaborate systems to avoid the vulnerability of genuine connection. We establish rules and contracts to maintain control. But the most valuable experiences come when we break those self-imposed limitations. The video ended, leaving Olivia silent. "He's in New York next week," Thomas said quietly, "lecturing at Columbia." The symphony's tour concluded 3 days later in London. Instead of returning to Paris with the orchestra, Olivia boarded a flight to New York, acting on impulse rather than careful planning for the first time in months. The lecture hall was packed when she slipped in at the back. Dominic stood at the podium, discussing the intersection of technology and humanity. He looked different, more approachable, his formal suits replaced by casual attire, a short beard softening his features. When the lecture ended and the crowd dispersed, she remained seated, suddenly uncertain. Dominic gathered his notes, not yet noticing her presence. "Your perspective on ethical innovation has evolved," she said, loud enough for him to hear. His head snapped up, eyes finding hers with uncanny precision. For a moment, neither spoke. "Olivia," he finally said, her name carrying a weight of unspoken words. She moved toward the podium, stopping at a careful distance. "I broke our third rule," she admitted. "No emotional entanglements. I broke it somewhere between pretending to care about you and realizing I actually did." Dominic set down his papers. "I broke all the rules," he countered softly. "I constructed an elaborate deception just to have you in my life because I was too afraid to simply ask you to be there." "Why did you leave everything behind?" she asked. "Because you made me question what everything should be." He closed the distance between them slightly. The company, the merger. They were just more performances. You showed me the difference between achievement and fulfillment. And what fulfills Dominic Westfield now? Teaching. Creating opportunities rather than acquiring power. He hesitated. But something's still missing. Olivia took a breath. "I've been offered a permanent position with the New York Philharmonic." Hope flickered across his face. "Are you accepting?" "That depends," she said. "I don't want another contract or arrangement. If I stay in New York, it would be without conditions or rules." "Just truth," he agreed, reaching for her hand. "No performance necessary." When their fingers interlaced, it felt nothing like the choreographed touches they'd once practiced, and everything like coming home after a long journey. "We wasted so much time pretending," Olivia murmured. Dominic shook his head. "Not wasted. Without the pretense, we might never have discovered what was real." Outside the lecture hall, autumn leaves danced across the campus walkways. They walked together without direction or purpose, no longer performing for an audience or adhering to a script. The music in Olivia's mind, silent for so many months, returned with surprising clarity. Not the structured classical pieces she'd mastered, but something entirely new, unwritten, and full of possibility. Sometimes she realized the most beautiful compositions begin when we stop following someone else's score and start creating our own.